I think where I'd like to start off is how exactly was Mary lost? What do you mean by what do you mean by rediscovering her?
Yeah, it's somewhat akin to let's go to the word quest, picking up on Schweitzer's word, the quest for the historical Jesus, or also like Ed Sanders' use of, he was probably looking for a little different title. When any of us get up around 60 or 70 years old, we often think, well, I need to write my Jesus book now. I'm a New Testament scholar. Everybody writes a Jesus book. I mean, you can name a half a dozen of them, Jacob. Dom Crossan, of course, Bart's written his, and Dale Allison's written his, all these people you've interviewed. And so Ed Sanders, the late Ed Sanders, died, I think, just last year, a year before. He called it the historical figure of Jesus. I kind of like that. So the idea of the quest for who Jesus actually was implies that there's a mist or a veil or something through which you need to go to get to the real Jesus or the historical figure of Jesus, however you want to put it. Well, it's the same with Mary, his mother. This is the mother, not Mary Magdalene. Um, and that's why I needed the subtitle. Because if you're just browsing a bookstore or just looking through titles, you might think, oh, another book on Mary Magdalene. So definitely rediscovering the mother of Jesus. We're in much worse shape because at least with Jesus, we've got sayings and teachings of Jesus. We've got all kinds of stories and parables and many, many accounts of actions. And with Mary, we're down to about a dozen scenes. And it's bookmarked by only ones people really know are Christmas, Mary, Madonna and Child, the manger scene that we've seen all of our lives growing up, all over the Western world, or the crucifixion, where we got Mary the mother and Mary Magdalene and Salome and other women standing courageously in front of Jesus' cross. And then she almost disappears, not quite, we'll get to that, but so the way she's lost is she becomes something that she never was, historically speaking. Now, here we get into, how we talk about the Jesus of history and the Christ of faith? We need to do that with Mary, the Mary of history and the Mary of faith. So the Mary of faith is the Blessed Virgin who only had one child, Jesus. She wasn't sexually married to anybody. She was married to Joseph, married like in double quotes, but in later Christian theology and tradition, she has to be celibate because she's the holy vessel to bear God, basically. So Theotokos in Greek, Greek, God bearer, the one who bore God. So now we're into the full theism of Jesus, theistic view of Jesus, so called high Christology. I mean, high Christology is saying it mildly. You're basically claiming he's the creator of the world. So the creator of the world became a little baby, and Mary bore him. And then she kind of disappears from the scene until the crucifixion. And yet there are some things along the way. I used a metaphor that's probably not very good, but I just called it breadcrumbs. So I'm going through this thick theological forest. I'm not even looking up to the Mother of God, the Queen of Heaven, because that's not the historical Mary. Just by definition, that's the Mary people believe in. But what could we say about Mary as she was? And there are the breadcrumbs, but breadcrumbs could lead you somewhere, but they're not going to tell you all you want. So if you think we're up the creek uh, in terms of Jesus, boy, with Mary, when one of my colleagues, I don't mind saying her name, you know her well, and she wrote a great review of the book, Canada Moss. When I first told her about this, she goes, "Oh, James, you're going to have such a challenge because we just don't know much about her, and it could always go either way." And I said, yeah. And 10 years later, Jacob, here I am with my product. So she was certainly right about that. And there are a lot of books about Mary. I mean, if you just type in Mary, Mother of Jesus, in like Amazon, you'll get hundreds of books, but they're all the devotional books. As far as the historical Mary, the kind of thing I'm trying to do, uh, I know of two or three or four, but even those have a certain kind of devotional theological piety to them, or they're just trying to talk about women in early Christianity and how important women are, and therefore, we shouldn't forget the women. Hold on and just get a drink here. It's water, don't worry. So that's the challenge. That's why I call it the Lost Mary. Now, how she became lost, I argue in the book that it is a deliberate erasure. It's not just that, unfortunately, history doesn't preserve a lot of details. I think it's a deliberate erasure of her because for the church, she's only needed to bring Jesus into the world to be the pious, godly woman that every Christian believes that she was. And she sort of done her job. But for a historian, if you try to do history of any figure, you want to know a lot more than that. So, besides the little tidbits that I follow in the book, I do two other things. I go outside the New Testament to try to find other sources on Mary. One of the best, I don't know if you've ever interviewed Stephen Shoemaker. Have you ever interviewed him from Duke? He's written the major historical books on Mary, although most of his are about her death and how the Mary devotion began to develop. But at least he does say in the beginning of his main book on Marian, it's called Marian Devotion. It actually has a name. He talks about how her knowledge of her was muted and written out, and he has the same view I do. It's because the Jesus family was so important to the first followers of Jesus, but to the later followers, that family, James particularly, the brother of Jesus, who becomes leader of the movement when Jesus dies, who knows that? We know it, you know it, and we talk about it on YouTube. But if you start polling people on the streets, or even when I ask my classes, I say, now, when Jesus died, James took over. They'll go like, excuse me, Dr. David, did you say Peter? No, I said James. You go, James who? I tell you, I taught at Notre Dame. Remember, Jacob? I taught at a Catholic university, my first school I taught at back in the 80s. And the students very innocently would go, James who? They've heard of Peter, Andrew, James, and John, the fisherman James. Well, it's not him. He's killed in Acts 12, remember, by Herod Agrippa. He's beheaded according to the book of Acts. We really don't know historically if that's valid, but he's off the scene at least. We don't know anything about him. And then there's another James, son of Alphaeus. Some people think that could be the brother of Jesus. I've wondered about that. But since he doesn't say a single thing in any of the Gospels ever, other than getting listed by name, you can't really say with any degree of certainty. And yet we have all of these sources outside the New Testament. If we read them back into the New Testament, I'm talking about James, who's also a son of Mary, brother of Jesus, what do we find out? What we find out is that he's mentioned in the oddest way in the New Testament, first in Paul's letters, which is very important because these are letters, not gospels. And Paul says, I went up to Jerusalem and I visited James, the Lord's brother. Now, we can talk all day about, brother could mean cousin, brother could mean step brother, or whatever. But I take the most, I think, natural position that Mary married Joseph, that Jesus was her firstborn. Then the other four boys that are named, is this not Mary, mother of Jesus, or Jesus, son of Mary? and his brothers, James, Joseph, Simon, and Jude, and his sisters. So I take it that way. And I also am aware that one of the ways Mary got lost is you say, well, those kids aren't hers. None of those kids are hers. And you say, well, whose are they? Either they're Joseph's from a previous marriage, that's the Greek Orthodox Church says that, because they're not against Joseph being a sexual, normal human being and being married. So the idea would be he's an old man. In some traditions, he's 95 years old, Jacob. So clearly, he's not going to touch this young girl. And I think that's kind of the idea. Don't get any ideas. That wasn't his interest. He was like a caretaker or something. I'll take care of the young Mary, who's probably a teenager with this new baby. And he's revered and he's honored, but these are his kids from another marriage. But the Roman church in the West says, no, 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 he can't have sex either. Holy Joseph, if you're holy, how could you be a sexual being? Just think about it, especially the three most holy people in Christianity in the Catholic Roman tradition are Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, right? Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, the Trinity there of the three. And they all have to be kind of above the world. They're flesh and blood. Okay, they're human, but they can't be ordinary. Why? Because at the time these traditions begin to develop, and it takes a while for Mary to get lost. I would say it takes 150 to 200 years. You're into the second and third century when she's really lost. And then by the fourth century, it's like Queen of Heaven, Mother of God, and a perpetual virgin, meaning ever virgin, never. And then they begin to even discuss whether she ever went to the toilet. And they go, oh, no, 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 no way. She was like an angel. She ate perfect food, just enough, and just enough water. It just becomes, out of this world, let's call it. I mean, this is not history. This is, I think it's fantasy, but maybe it's nice fantasy if you want to get into theological concepts. But historians try to find out what could we really know about Mary and use the same sources and the same methods that we'd use for any historical figure. It's just that we don't have enough. But we do have some outside sources about her death, but also just way on down through history, especially in the East, we pick up some other things. Now, the worst thing that we have that turns out to be somewhat useful, but basically to me, emblematic of what I'm talking about, is this thing that you can hardly say, the pro-evangelium of James. What a mouthful. It's supposed to be a gospel of Mary or about Mary that James, the brother, wrote. And it's about Mary's parents, Joachim and Anna, and they're wealthy, and he has a landed estate with flocks and herds. This is the father of Mary, the mother of Jesus' grandfather, through his mother. And we never hear about him in the New Testament, but we get his name. And Anna, Jesus' grandmother, Anne. So there are traditions about her, but mainly it's that she has to be immaculately conceived. Now, what does that mean? People confuse the virgin birth and the immaculate conception. My students at Notre Dame always said, hey, do you believe in the immaculate conception? They thought that meant Jesus was born of a virgin. But as we know, that means, oh, no, no. That means Mary was born without original sin. So now we're in theological land. This thing called original sin that gets passed down, from generation to generation, because Adam sinned and Eve sinned in the Garden of Eden. So every child ever born that's of the lineage of Adam, and that would include you and me, we're born with original sin. This is a major Roman Catholic Christian doctrine that all the creeds later affirm. So we got a problem with Mary. It's like we got to make her holy, but if she's born with original sin, how can she be the pure spiritual vessel to bear Jesus, much less go to the toilet or ever have sex? So you see what we're doing? We're brushing her away. We're putting her everything in the heavenly realm, everything in this pre-existent realm. Although I don't think the church ever said she pre-existed, but Uh, I know you've read the Evangelium of James. It's the strangest thing. Did you notice that when Anna gets pregnant, guess who's out of town? Do you remember? Joachim's not even there. He goes. They want to have kids, and she's barren, as the Bible calls it. She can't have children, and they're getting older. And I want kids. We want kids. We want kids. Please give us kids. Kind of like the story of Hannah, in Samuel. And notice her name is Anna, Hannah. Ta-da, duh. Ask Dennis McDonald about that. And so the barren woman who can't have children, well, he's not even there. And then he comes back from the desert where he's been. The tradition is he goes down to Wadi Kelt, which is right down by Qumran. Maybe he's like an Essene or something, and he's praying night and day, please, Lord, give me a child, give me a child. And then he goes home, and everybody's rejoicing. He's coming home, and guess what? Anna's pregnant. Now, you got to read that and go, wait a minute. It doesn't really claim that it's, quote, a birth without a man. We shouldn't even talk about a virgin birth. We should talk about a conception of a human being without a human father. That's what we're really talking about. It doesn't really say that, but you could read it that way, because otherwise you say, well, she was born without original sin. Uh, well, then Anna would have original sin, her mother. So you have to go back another generation. You see this infinite regression that you would get into. So I think you just say, look, somehow God made sure that it was a holy union, and she was born. So she's and then that book, oh, it's just like they send her to the temple, and here's this little 3-year-old girl running around the temple barefooted, like Vestal virgins in a pagan temple. And then when she starts her period, God forbid, she's 12, they go like, oh, she can't be here. This is the holy temple of God. She has to leave. But then having her period is that's kind of human too, like bleeding. So there's not a lot of detail about that. And then when Jesus is born, she stays a virgin. Now, I don't want to get too gross here, but we're talking about she stays intact. And they check. A woman named Salome, literally, and I'll just quote it, inserts her hand into the Blessed Virgin to see if she's still intact, meaning she's never had sex. And her hand burns, and she takes it out and burns her hand. And then I think her hand gets healed or something. So we're in another, that is not the world of history. That's the world of trying to protect her from being a real human being. So that's what I mean by lost. And it gets, that would be the ultimate loss, is put her in heaven, make her utterly almost like an angel, not even human, living in the temple, being fed by angels, and just stuff that people liked in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th century. Then we go to the quest for the historical Jesus, and we don't go for that stuff. We go, no, what do we really know? How do we know it? And as Schweitzer said, from Reimarus Sureda, remember his famous book, we call it The Quest of the Historical Jesus. We try to get at that. How far have we come? I don't know. We just had a conference, as you know, with Bart Ehrman. I didn't listen to everything yet because I was in Greece, but I listened to some of them. And did you notice we don't have a lot of agreement on things? These are like some of the top people, and we're still batting it around. And how many programs, Jacob, do you think you've done on the historical Jesus? Like 100 or more? I mean,
Probably a lot more.
a lot more. And did you get a lot of agreement, generally speaking? A lot of different ideas,
No.
from he didn't even exist to we know everything to Matthew's first, Mark's first, this, that, there's Q, there's no Q. You almost want to throw up your hands, but each one of us, including James Tabor, we kind of have a view that we've done a pretty good job. I mean, I changed my mind. I'm open to persuasion. I've considered Marcion stuff. I've considered all kinds of things. But I do think in this book, I've done the best job I could do. And so I call it a new historical investigation of the most powerful woman in the world. So why do I say that? Because, women in general throughout history, but particularly in Western Christian history, they get a bad rap. I would not quote to you what Tertullian says about women because I think it's too vulgar, but he's not a fan. He's like a priest and a bishop or whatever he is. But they say nasty things about women, but it's not just the Christians. Remember when Socrates is dying and the women are crying, and oh, you're going to leave us get get the women away. We need to talk philosophy. Women are just they're all emotional. And remember Celsus when he's criticizing the Christians, he goes, "It's just a bunch of daffy, silly women. What could they know? Women don't know anything." It's even reflected in the Gospels where the women report the empty tomb, and the apostles go like, "Crazy women again." So this is embedded in the culture, and it's a horrible thing that we're trying to move out of in the 21st century. And in the 20th century, boy, we're moving fast, right? When my mother was born, when she was born, I believe, is when women got the vote. Harvard, Yale, Princeton, three major schools, William and Mary, uh, those were men's schools. That was for ministers, not women. Women need to cook and sew and make flowers grow. I'm quoting Bob Dylan, right? And then understand our pain as men. So I say in the book, name 4 or 5 famous women, and you go, let's just stay with the West. God forbid we try, Africa or Asia. Let's see. Oh, Helena Troy, got one. Okay, don't know anything about her, but Cleopatra, I know a little bit about her. Let's see. I don't know. Can't think of any. I mean, I really can, but you see my point. Usually people go, "Oh, I know Joan of Arc." You just jump to the Middle Ages. Well, it's just, or name some famous mothers of famous men, and tell us a little bit about them. Not much, just a little, like their name and what they did and how many kids there were. We don't know. I'm not saying a historian who's delved into all the records of the past, say 500 years, might come up with something, but we don't know. This is what we've done to women. It's a horrible thing. So if we can redeem this woman, and this is really, really what I want to do, if we can bring her back to her faith, she's Jewish. Mary is Jewish, not Christian. I just said such a shocking thing. I mean, wait a minute, she's Jewish. Just try the fest. Was she aware of Christmas, Easter, the Lord's Supper, the Mass, uh, confession, anything you want to name, the cross? Or was she aware of Passover, Shavuot, Sukkot, the Jewish festivals, the Sabbath? Did she prepare Sabbath meals? Did she get the household ready for the arrival of the Sabbath, as women do today in the Jewish quarter of Jerusalem and all over the world, really? When we're recording this right now, we're in Sukkot. Did she build a sukkah, as all Jews have done for centuries, and dwell in these temporary places to remember the time in the wilderness and so forth? That definitely goes back to Second Temple times. And it's mentioned in the New Testament, the Feast of Tabernacles, it's called. Another word for Sukkot is just the word for tabernacles. So that's the lost Mary, and I think she becomes lost for all of those reasons. But as a New Testament scholar, as I sometimes call myself, I really would rather call myself a historian of ancient Mediterranean religions. But focusing in, I come down to the Jesus movement. Well, think about it. We do have records of the movement where she mentioned. So let's take our earliest source, Paul. And what does he say? Never mentions her name. He says, Jesus, God sent forth his son, born of a woman, born under the Torah. Oh, great. So now we know that he was a real human being, born of a woman. It's not that he needed to say her name, but it would have been nice. because he certainly met, if he went to Jerusalem, he met Mary, because Mary's there. And it's being led by James, who's her son. So I don't go for the cousins, the stepchildren. I think these are children of Mary. I say in the book she had 7 or 8 or more children. Some may have died, but I did start looking at birth records. It's in my footnotes. There is a man in Egypt. He's 50 years old. He lives with his wife, who's actually older, 54. They have 8 children, 5 boys and 3 girls. The youngest is 7, the oldest is 29. Now, why did I write that one down? Because I think Mary ended up by her, uh, 30s or 40s, having 5 boys and up to 3 girls. We don't know about the girls because they're not named. Isn't that interesting? Mark 6:3. Are not his brothers here? James, Joseph, Simon, and Jude, and his sisters? Too bad. But we think one was Salome, and that's a very common name, but we think that might be one. And then we have tradition about another one might have been called Mary, which would make sense because Mary's about the most common female name. It's actually Miriam. It's a very Jewish name. There aren't many Miriams that are non-Jews. Most of the Miriams I've known over the years, they're always Jewish. So she's got a very Jewish name. It comes from Moses and Aaron's sister in the Torah. And then there's a tradition about a Sarah. I believe it's Sarah, but these are very late and some of them even medieval. So I think we just have to have sisters. But the point is, Matthew 1:25, Joseph waits till the birth of Jesus, and it says, and he knew her not until she had brought forth her firstborn son. Firstborn son is Jesus, and then they resume, or I shouldn't say they resume, according to Matthew, they take up a normal sexual life of a husband and a wife. And what happens if a woman is fertile and they live in a society in which birth control is not practiced, which is the society that they live in? And I know my grandmother, for example, had 11 children. She was from Texas, by the way, Jacob. And I'm older than you are, so you might have to go to your great grandmother, but I bet you'll find some relatives. 7, 8, 9 children. It's very common. And you know what? You look at even some of the ones that might die, it's like a year and a half to 2 years apart. It's like, how did they space their kids like that? They didn't space them. They have a baby, the baby's nursed. A few months after that, the woman resumes her period and so forth, and another baby's on the way. 9 months later, and you begin to see like stair steps, there's space. There are religions today that don't really practice birth control too much. I won't name any, but you know what they are. And we know they have large families. It's very common to have a family of 7 or 8 or 9 or 10. So this is not unusual. And also, as far as mortality rates, infant mortality is a curse and it's a problem, but sanitation is the key. And the Jews have all sorts of rules about sanitation. Not because of germs, I don't think they knew about germs, but ritual purity, right? There are all these rules about ritual purity and washing and so forth. So maybe that gave them a better health record. I don't know. There's some evidence of that here and there. So what happens in the New Testament? The family gets faded, or I'm going to be more direct, muted. Faded is like, just don't worry about it. Muted is like, quiet, like we go on mute. They actually get muted. And then they become more negative. Not Mary, she can't ever be negative, but like the brothers, like, they don't believe in him. And then James, he's disguised by, well, let me start with the Gospel of John. That's the latest, and that's when this is really ramping up. So what do we have in the Gospel of John? Everybody loves the Gospel of John. What's Jesus' mother's name in John? This is a trick question for my students. Anybody know Jesus' mother's name in John? They go, would she have a different name in John? Is that muting or fading? I think it's muting because you turn off the sound and now it's his mother, his mother, his mother. And he seems to kind of talk disrespectfully to her, although in the book I don't even allow that because I'm not sure it means when he says, woman, what have I to do with you, and so forth. I've been told by people that know the culture and the language, and my Greek's pretty good, that it's just an expression that means, is that something I should be concerned with? Like are we in charge of the wedding arrangements? This is in that wedding feast at Cana and so forth. But you get these little hints along the way. And so she's not even named. But worse than that, now here, everybody just goes crazy here. I don't know why this happens. I did an interview. I'm not going to say who it was, but I did an interview earlier this week where we talked about my idea. And does anybody hold this idea that the beloved disciple is James, except Robert Eisenman and James Tabor? And yes, I got it from him. But as soon as I heard it, I said, of course, if they're 5 brothers and 3 sisters or more, and Jesus dies, he's the elder son, who do you pass the care of your widowed mother over to? You go, John, son of Zebedee. What? It doesn't even make sense. Who thought of that? Irenaeus in the 2nd century. He goes, he's the one who leaned on the Lord's breast. It was John. And they're mixing him up. And Eusebius says this. There are 2 Johns. You're mixing him up with the John of Ephesus, who's John the Elder. And that's where Stephen Shoemaker is very good, because if you go to Ephesus, I was on that BAS tour, Paul in the Greek islands, and we went to Ephesus, and everybody wanted to go to Mary's house. I said, I'm not going. You guys want to go to Mary's house? Fine, but I'm not going to go to fake Mary's house, fake Mary's fake house. I've been to it. I'm not interested in it. It has no basis whatsoever. It's based on the visions of a nun. I think I have it in my book in a footnote, but I believe it was 1700s that they found Mary's house. And now the Pope goes there, and the whole, it's very, very famous. I want to go. What would Mary be doing in Ephesus? I mean, just think about it. You got this rural Jewish woman from Nazareth, and John the Apostle ends up in Ephesus. I don't think there's any historical basis for that. I don't know what happened to John, but I know one thing: the beloved disciple is not John. I have nothing against the sons of thunder, as they're called by Jesus, but we have 2 stories of the sons of thunder. One is that village did not accept us. Can we burn them with fire, Lord? That doesn't sound very, John's supposed to be the loving apostle that just loves all the time, right? Love one another. Well, maybe he learned, but still, that's not his character in the Gospels. And the other one is, I know you're going to die and suffer, and we'll get past that. But when you get your kingdom, could my brother and I be the number 1 and 2 positions, please, ahead of Peter? And Jesus rebukes them both times. First time he says, you don't know what spirit you're of. So they had a bad spirit. And then the second time he says, you have no idea what you're asking. And there's the top positions are going to go to the suffering people, right? Those who are the least become the greatest. You really want to be the least? Because here's that cross over there, you see? And it's James for sure. He says, mother, behold your son. Son, behold your mother. Now, why would John not say his name? And then at the end, he says, and we've got this testimony from that disciple, and we know his testimony is true. If you got a testimony, could you give me the name of the person you're claiming I should believe? I say, Jacob, I've got some evidence from you from a person. You go, what's his name? I'm not telling you his name. It's really good evidence, though. We know it's true. What's his name? I'm going to tell you. Something's going on here. I think it's a cover-up. And I think Eisenman pointed that out very adequately, and I give him credit. Then we go to Paul doesn't have a problem, James, the Lord's brother, because he's living in the time and meets the guy, so it's not a mystery. But now we're talking about writing later in these Gospels. So then we get to Acts. That's boy, Luke's into it too. He gives a day of Pentecost, right? Church, we say the church is birthed, the birth of the church on the day of Pentecost, Acts 2. And you have the apostles there, the 11, and then they appoint Matthias to replace Judas, who betrayed Jesus, right? And it names them. He names them. Here they are. These are the ones that were there. And then at the end it goes, and Mary, his mother, and his brothers were there too. Like, yeah, they were there all right. They're also in charge, according to later records that we have. Jesus gave the care of his mother and the church over to, or the church, it's not the church, it's the movement, I guess you just call it the Jesus movement, the sect of the Nazarenes. He gave the care of the sect, S-E-C-T, of the Nazarenes over to James. That's admitted by all the church fathers, Clement of Alexandria, everybody says that. Eusebius is even okay with it, and he's in the 4th century. James took charge, but they try to make it, well, that's in Jerusalem. Well, guess what? That is the church, so to speak, at that time is the church in Jerusalem. That's the mother church. So what does the book of Acts do after that? This just blows my mind. Acts 15, biggest controversy ever in early Christianity. And what is it? What are we going to do at the Goyim? What are you going to do at the Gentiles? And there's one group of Nazarenes, they believe in Jesus. They got to convert to Judaism. Come on. The law is good, perfect, holy. They need to convert to Judaism. Even Paul, you were Jewish. You need to bring them all the way in. They don't have to do it tomorrow or the next day, but they need to be moving toward full conversion because this is a Jewish movement. Jesus was Jewish. All of us are Jewish, and they should convert to Judaism. So belief in Jesus is fine. They're not going to be rejected at the coming of Jesus, but they need to be moving in that direction. And Peter speaks, and Peter says, no, that's just not the way it is. And Paul speaks, and he says, that's not the way it is. And then we get the fatal verse, fatal for really understanding what's going on. And James stands up, and before all the group, this is the elders, the apostles, and everybody. The apostles are sitting there listening to James. And I'm going to hit the desk. Okay, you ready? My decision is, your decision is, who are you? Do you realize the shock of that? I grew up in the churches of Christ, reading the book of Acts, reading my Bible like a good boy all my life. I read that. I could have told you that story when I was 15, 16 years old. What happened in Acts 15? They decided, and James said, you say, James Tabor, who was James? He was the guy that I guess was in charge. You go like, but he's not one of the apostles, no, and is not Peter, no, because he just spoke. And then he says, let's write a letter. So he writes a letter to all the churches and signs it. From James and all the elders and apostles, he is the leader. That's Jesus' brother. So yes, Paul went up to Jerusalem and he saw Peter and then he saw James, and he calls them the pillars of the church, the three, James, Peter, and John. So John does achieve some recognition. Let's just say he redeems his reputation. I'm not trying to trash him, but it is interesting that there's nothing good said about him in the Gospels at all. In Mark, those are not good stories about, and I think one's in Luke and one's in Mark. So, but other ways she gets faded. Here's another one. Luke gives the same record of Mary, the mother, and the four brothers and the sisters. He's covering the same thing, and what does he say? He just doesn't even mention the brothers. He doesn't. Matthew mentions them at least, but he doesn't mention them. And Mark, when he's talking about Mary, he says Mary of Yosei. Now he has told you that one of Mary's kids is named Yosei. It's a nickname. It's not Yosei, it's Yosei. It's the name we have in the Talpiot tomb. So it's very rare. There are only two ossuaries that have that spelling with the hey at the end, not a yod. Yosei. It's clearly short for Joseph, but there aren't many examples of it. I think in Talilan, the lexicon of Jewish names, there are two ossuaries and maybe one or two other that have that nickname. But Mark does. Why doesn't he just say and Mary his mother and Yosei? In Mark's case, I'm going to let him off the hook because he's already told you Mary and Yosei. So I think he thinks you're smart enough to remember Mary, mother of Yosei. And later he says Mary, mother of James. Oh, that should pretty well tell you. But see, that's because he knows that James is in charge when Mark writes. But when Luke writes, don't even mention them. And then at the cross, when you're naming all these women from Galilee who stand in front of the cross, Luke just says women from Galilee. Women from Galilee. Uh, you know, there's a band of women. And there are other places, but essentially she gets written out of the story. I could say more, but I think that's it. The biggest thing is the sexuality and the religion. But if I had to tally it, I would say, okay, she's lost her womanhood. So, well, she was a woman. What do you mean? Well, she wasn't a woman the way she's portrayed as married and having children. That's removed from her. So she's female. She's a mother, okay, of Jesus, but she's not a woman who falls in love with her husband or learns to love her husband if the marriage was arranged and has children that she loves. She doesn't have any of that. I like to say she was robbed of those things. She's not really Jewish to most people. She's definitely Catholic, right? And certainly Christian. And she's not a nun because a nun is further down the line in terms of the orders of brothers and sisters, but she certainly is nun like, meaning she is celibate and holy and beyond this world and so forth, as I've already talked about. And then her children, I mean, tell a woman who has, five or six children and devotes her whole life to caring for them and raising them and wanting them to turn out to be amazing kids. You didn't have any children. Those children weren't yours. That's kind of a stretch. By the way, what the Roman Catholics say, they don't say that they were Joseph's from a previous marriage. They say that they were Joseph's brother's children. That way, Joseph also never has intercourse with Mary. But what about Matthew 1, verse 25? He knew her not. We know that he knew her means had sex everywhere in the Bible until you come to that verse. And then some people would say, well, it doesn't really mean intercourse. Well, what does it mean? Like they got to know each other better and had a conversation? I mean, it's so clear. He knew her not until she had brought forth her firstborn son. It's traditional that you don't have sexual intercourse during pregnancy in certain cultures because it's for procreation. Therefore, you wait till the child is born and usually even weaned. So before you would resume sexual relations. Let's see. Is there anything else? Well, I opened the book by saying she's the best known, least known woman in history. So her real story has been stolen from her, and she's been made into a mother goddess, basically. And I'm not trashing Catholics who piously believe that Mary is the compassionate one and she can go to her son Jesus and intercede for you. And I mean, billions of people believe this. And I'm not one to trash somebody's faith, but I'm a historian and I don't think she knew anything about that or represented that in any way. But but there are little things along the way that you can pick up, and that's what I do in the book.